Shamaniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome back to episode 259 of the GeoGearHeads. And once again, we're talking about 3D printing. Yes, we love 3D printing. I'm Daryl W4 for Chris of the Northwest. Welcome back, Chris.
Well, thank you so much. And we do love 3D printing. We love it so much, we brought in our best friends when it comes to 3D printing. We have Shermanator18 with us.
Hello, everyone.
We have the infamous C. Nelson.
Hi, guys.
And perhaps the even more infamous Antaeus. How's that?
Good evening.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun show, at least for us. And I'm sure we're going to run over that 1 hour mark. So I'm pretty sure we're going to run into a patron bonus because we don't want to flood everyone with all this 3D printing stuff if they might not be interested. But we are looking at the 3D printing mostly because it is such a cool way to make caches. But before we get into that, there are several types of 3D printing, and it's important that we talk about one in particular, but a couple of the other ones are what's called SLA, which is a stereolithography. These things are really cool, but not really very good for caches. Because the way these things work is it's a big vat of usually a resin that hardens when the light hits it. So there's a bunch of kits out there to make your own stereolithography printer where it uses a DLP projector. Very, very cool. One of the nice things about these is you make a small printer with a high-res projector, you get really, really fine details. That's awesome, but the prints aren't generally as water resistant
Or durable.
Exactly, as the ones we're talking about. But you know where these things are really used a lot is in the stop motion animation. The stop motion guys love these printers, the SLAs. There's also the SLS, which is a selective laser sintering, and a bunch more of them. But the ones that we're talking about, the ones that everyone thinks of as a 3D printer, are what's known as FFF or FDM, which is the fused filament fabrication or fused deposition modeling. And most of the time now you're going to see the FFF because FDM is actually a copyrighted, I think it is, term by or trademark of Stratasys. And Stratasys is this big behemoth in this market. So they actually purchased MakerBot, and I think everyone knows MakerBot is the 3D printer. But it's a pretty cool concept because all it's doing is taking a big roll, usually of filament, which is just plastic, and melting it and squirting it kind of like you'd squirt ink onto a page with an inkjet printer. But it's actually doing it in 3D and sticks together. And those silly little pens, the 3D printing pens, they're all doing the same thing. It's just taking those sticks of plastic, melting it, and oozing out all over your desk.
Kind of like hot glue, but a little more precise.
Right. Now, Jeff, you had an interesting story about the MakerBot situation there.
The Stratasys, the guy who formed the company, he actually had an idea to create a little toy for his daughter. It was a frog, and he used a hot glue gun with like candle wax and some other type of material I can't recall now. I'm sure it's in the notes.
Polyethylene.
Yeah, thank you. And so he actually created a toy from it. Well, that idea was the birth of Stratasys and 3D printing. Pretty cool stuff.
Very cool. And we want to talk about the printers that we actually have. And Jeff, I'll let you kick that off since you actually have a MakerBot.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth. So I have a MakerBot Replicator 2. I also have a micro 3D little guy that I got off of Kickstarter, which will allow me to do other filament types instead of just PLA, which is what the MakerBot Replicator 2 uses. And then I've got those little 3D doodlers that you mentioned, one for my kiddo and one for me. And I actually have an Olo, maybe eventually coming if they ever fulfill the Kickstarter. That is an SLA printer. And it actually uses your cell phone as the lighting source.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. Hopefully it's going to, arrive eventually.
All right. And Mr. Nelson, what do you got?
I've got a Wanhao Duplicator i3 right there. It's a Prusa i3 design, which is an open source, and it can print pretty much everything. I've got an all-metal hot end in it, so I can do ABS and PET, as well as PLA. For geocaches, the ABS, this is a cache right here that I made. ABS works really well because it'll last a long time in the sunlight. So, years.
Nothing
We'll get it.
out here in the Northwest.
We'll get into the materials in a little bit, but you got to hit on something that is really prevalent in these 3D printers. It's kind of that like tuner mentality for most of the people getting into the 3D printing right now at home. It's let's go and upgrade this, and that can get you into trouble.
I think you got that bug worse than just about everybody.
I think I did, but part of that is because I've had so many problems with mine. But we'll get into that in a moment. Shermanator 18 also got her printer recently. So which one did you end up getting?
Right. So I think you guys posted something that you mentioned the Malyan M150 was on sale a few weeks ago. So I jumped on that opportunity when I saw it, and I think Daryl, you bought one a few days within when I bought mine too, right?
Well, I think that sale was only like for a day or two, and we both jumped on it. I think that day.
I think so.
It took forever for it to arrive, and of course, afterward, they dropped the price even further for the Cyber Monday.
Right.
So you could actually get this printer for $170.
Wow.
So yeah, I've got the Malyan M150 as well, which is also the i3 clone essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a lot of problems with mine. It worked fine for a little while, and then like the entire right side of the unit started having issues. So the pulley is actually bad, so they're sending me a new pulley for it. And the pulley is what guides the belt, essentially, gives it the tension. So that's actually worn out, and I could actually make it work a little bit with some lube, but only for about 3-4 hours at a time. But the what do they call the screw on the right side of the screws on either side of the gantry? I can't remember. But
the Z-axis screws.
Yeah. What are they called? There's a name for those screws. But in any case, essentially. But the right side kept dragging, and it turns out it was just in need of lots of lube. So it's like little by little, I'm dealing with all this stuff. And then the Molex connector blows out for the heater. It's like one thing after another on this printer.
Jeez.
Wow. So, did you get another printer?
Well, I did end up getting another printer. I actually got the Monoprice Select 3D printer and sent that one back because within a couple of hours, the heated build plate on it fried at the controller.
Wow.
Holy smokes.
So,
Okay.
Lots of bad luck.
Now, I will say, both of those printers were delivered by the same carrier, same big brown truck. So, I'm thinking there might be a problem with the carrier. I don't know, but yeah.
You might be onto something there, because I know some of my parts were loose when I got mine. So I had to, kind of reassemble things.
Yeah. Well, and it's not out of the question that you have shipping damage, and especially with like the right side of the Malian being all messed up. I'm wondering if it got soaked or something. You know, because it was missing the lube. You know, we've got rust coming out of that pulley. So it could have been even at the warehouse. I don't know, but it was not a good situation. Still isn't. I still don't have that printer up and running. But I ended up grabbing a PowerSpec Ultra 3D because that thing went on sale. Nowhere near as cheap, but it's a cool sounding printer because it's actually built off the FlashForge Dreamer. So it's got the Wi-Fi, it's dual extruder, so you can do 2 different filaments on the same print, which I kind of really wanted to try doing. That's
cool.
You know, take some of these weird color changing filaments and glow in the dark and embed those in with something else, you know, make like a plaque that has the glow in the dark letters, or it changes when you take the UV light to it and gives you the clues. In reality, I'm not sure that that's going to work all that well, since you can see the outlines of the different filaments as it draws them in there. So it might not work as well as I thought, but I still wanted to give it a shot because it was a good idea at $600, I think, on their sale. And it does have the enclosed build chamber, which is supposed to be better for doing ABS.
Is that it right there behind you?
That's it right there. It replaced the M150 since the M150 is non-functional. And I've been playing with this thing all week, and I love the idea of the Wi-Fi.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely hate their slicer, and that's the only way to use the Wi-Fi. And because it doesn't use standard G code, the slicer that I do like doesn't work with it. So this thing is going to be going back to Micro Center. and its biggest problem, and we'll talk about it, the adhesion a little later, is that I can't get stuff to actually stick to the bed. But I know how to fix that, I think. It's just because it's going to go back, I don't want to do it. Now, Chris, you actually got one of these things at work.
Wow. Daryl, I took mine out of the box and it worked.
Well, kind of. You had some help.
Well, a little bit.
Your coworker made it work.
Yeah, I got a Monoprice Select Mini 3D, which is the Malian M200 for all intents and purposes, same printer. It's a very entry-level machine. I got it. It wasn't even on sale. It was just released. It was, $200 or just under.
Wow.
And, I thought, that's a great thing. Let's just get into 3D. Because I know it's coming down the road at work, and I want to get a jump on it. So at $200, it's almost an impulse buy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and for most of the stuff that geocachers are going to want to print, something small like that is going to be big enough. If you're just doing like the little containers, the little puzzle boxes, you can use something like that to print those in all the little parts. And Sydney, you were just working on one of the Cryptexes, and I know none of those parts were all that large, so they probably would have fit on that small little printer.
Nice.
Yeah, not really. I actually doubled the size of this, so if you could make this, the one I found on Thingiverse is actually really small. This is about 2 or 3 inches long, I think.
Which is still smaller than the build area of that printer.
Uh-huh.
And that is something to make sure that you look at if you are going to get into the 3D printing, is the build area. The bed itself has its build area, and then there's the height, the Z-axis. So if you want to print like a plaque or something, you need to have a wider build plate than tall, but most of the time I think the tall is more important than the width. What do you guys think?
I agree.
I don't know about that. I mean, you can, lay things down if it's not tall, but I know size matters, and I probably have all as build plates of any of us here. So.
Bigger is better.
Yeah, the trouble with laying stuff down is then you're going to need supports.
Right.
And then you have to clean up those supports.
That's a pain.
Yeah.
I hate that.
So there's issues with that one. But Sydney, you're new to this, and what do you think the hardest part of learning to 3D print has been for you?
Well, the hardest thing for me was figuring out how to level the bed. I had used a 3D printer before, but it had like a self-leveling feature, so I never really had to do that. That was that previous job I had, so I don't have access to that printer anymore. But so I think I finally got this one leveled, and I haven't had to make any changes because I've been getting good prints for the past couple of weeks, so I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that nothing goes wrong here for a while.
Now, that's not a removable build plate, is it?
No.
You have a heated bed, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Now, I totally forgot to mention that as one of the other problems with the printer was the support for my build plate was bent, essentially. Oh. It was torqued. So that was giving me problems, too. It turned out all I had to do was take the build plate off, release the screws that hold the bearings in place, and it popped right back. And so now I haven't had to level it as much. Well, except now the thing doesn't work at all anyway.
Yeah. You got bigger problems now.
Yeah. But it did take a lot of time. And every time I was printing, especially when I had that one axis on the, or one screw on the Z-axis hanging because of the lack of lube, I had to go and re-level it every time. And that was kind of a good thing because I got pretty good at doing the bed leveling.
Yeah. That's a skill you really need to get down.
Yeah. It is an art. Mm-hmm. And I found the type of paper that you use is a big deal. Because for anyone who doesn't know, the way that you level a bed on one of these printers that doesn't have self-leveling is you put a piece of paper in and pinch it between the nozzle and the bed, and you're looking for the point at which it starts to hang, but doesn't hold it in place, and you can still get it back in. If you can get it in really easy, then you know it's a little too far away. If you don't feel it dragging,
you want a little bit of
technical.
It is an art that has to be learned. And there's also the ones that I think most of us have are the 4-point bed leveling, where you have a screw in each corner. One of the things I really like on this, which one? The power spec one that I can't remember the name of, the 3D Ultra.
Ultra 3D.
Ultra 3D, thank you. And it's like the MakerBots, they have 3-point bed leveling. Yeah. So there's only 3 screws. Yeah. Which does make it much, much easier. But as I understand it, it's a little bit harder to get 3-point leveling to work well on a larger build plate. And that's one of the nice things about the i3, the Prusa i3 clones, is they do have a larger build plate. So you can build bigger stuff than like the Replicator 2s.
I think we're having audio issues with Chris.
I think we are. Mr.
Not you, Mr. Chris.
Mr. Nelson. Mr. Offenauer.
I'm thinking all right. Should have responded by now.
Yeah. Well, while he's working on that, Cindy, you also had another issue.
Right. So, like I said before, I used to use an Ultimaker, and that had a feature where it would reel the filament in itself. It had like a little motor in there, so you didn't really have to do any work. You just kind of put it in the hole, and it sucked the filament in by itself. So the problem I've had is figuring out, how exactly I have to stick the edge of the filament into the nozzle and get it to go all the way through. And sometimes it kind of comes out the side somehow. And yeah, but I think it's just coming out some sort of crack in the nozzle or something. I don't know exactly.
What it is it's the space in the clamp, essentially, in the feeder. Yeah. So there's a little space out the back, and I've done that a number of times. Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a very good design there.
No, but it's the same design that almost all of these are using. The difference, though, is because of, I think, the way that it enters in these Prusa clones. It's just a little easier that if the filament is a little bent, which, happens all the time.
Right.
It's on a roll. It's going to get a little bit bent. Mm-hmm. If it gets, like especially toward the end of the roll, if you don't straighten it out and get it in, it wants to go out the back.
Yep.
And that's just, to me, it was just, playing with it a little bit and getting used to finding that hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really gotta like bend out the end of your filament when you go to put it in to get it straight.
Yeah, and one of the tricks that I've learned is always load your filament hot. You know, never do the filament with a cold nozzle because, well, you're not actually loading it.
Yeah, that doesn't work so well.
No. You know, one of the things that I've kind of learned, and I don't know that it's actually good, is to, when I'm unloading it, I always heat the nozzle up hotter than I should. That's one of the tips that, you know, hotter than you should for that material. That's one of the tips I found online for trying to get rid of the extra materials by making it hotter. It flows really easy. So you push it down to get rid of any of the globs that might get stuck on the end of the filament when it cools, and then you can pull it out really easy. Because I've had a few times where you get this little ball at the end of the nozzle,
Oh,
and
yeah.
when you try to pull that back out, it gets stuck on the feeder.
I've had to do that a lot before.
Oh,
Hey, I'm back.
there he is.
Hey.
So that what you were talking about, where it wraps, if you straighten out that piece of filament, it takes a few seconds, but if you get the straight path, it'll go right in there.
Yeah.
Right.
And when you're unloading, Daryl, by the way,
Yeah.
what you do is preheat it as you normally would right before print, push it down, and then pull it up, and it'll come right out.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was talking about. But one of the things that I saw was saying, you know, heat it up to like the top end of the range for that filament, just to make it melt real easy and get the color out. And that's one of the other reasons why I tend to feed a little bit more when I'm loading it, is to try to clean out the nozzle and get the previous color material out.
Yep.
Well, another thing that you mentioned in the show notes, Sydney, is the adhesion stuff. And you, on your Ultimaker 2, had a glass build plate, which is what almost everyone I know who's really into 3D printing seems to like.
Right. So that was super easy because you don't need some people use like that painter's tape or masking tape. Right now I have build tack on mine. You can also use like hairspray to spray it on there to get your print to stick. But with the glass build plate, you didn't have to use anything. No tape, no hairspray, no nothing. It just sticks. And so
well, usually the hairspray is you can't use just any hairspray too. This has to be apparently, you know, Aquanet, and it has to be like the old nasty stuff, not any of the newer derivatives of Aquanet. It's like there's one version of Aquanet that works.
Right here.
Jeff has some.
Yeah,
I use it, man. This stuff is great. I don't have any adhesion problems.
Yeah, and
because of that,
you have to use that on like the PEI or something like that, I think, and on the glass build plates. But depending on the material, you don't even necessarily need it. It depends on how you're using it. But I think Chris Nelson over there turned me on to the build tack, and I have to have that on all my printers now. And one of the cool things is the Monoprice Maker Select actually comes with a variant of the build tack, but it doesn't work nearly as well as build tack does. Oh, sorry, Chris, we couldn't catch that. You cut out.
Mine didn't come with anything like that.
Oh. You didn't have anything at all? No painter's tape?
With a large piece of masking tape already on the bed.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what the Malian came with, was the masking tape, and that needed to go, because that was not working very well and came up with some of my prints.
Well, in a little bit, but the first couple of prints. But I have an aluminum build.
I'm sorry, try that again. You have an aluminum build plate?
You can't hear me, huh?
Nope, now we can.
Okay. I don't know. I'm quite loud here to myself.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I think what's going on is Chris's audio is bleeding you out.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, there you have it. I said everything I needed to say.
I've used this before. This is PEI. This sticks just as good as the build tack, but for me, it's kind of a pain. And this is the build tack. It's just a nice thin sheet with adhesive on the back. And basically you just peel and stick. And it sticks to an aluminum heated build plate perfectly. And prints stick to it like glue all the time. I've printed 900 hours on my build tack, on the sheet of build tack before, and had it sticking from the first print to the last print.
Really?
I ask you how long it lasted for. Wow. Okay.
900 hours, huh?
Yeah, and I've screwed up my build tack. Otherwise, I probably would still have the first one on there. But I tried some of the flexible material, and I had some bad instructions on that from the manufacturer, basically. But I clogged the build tack, so nothing would stick to it where I had that done. And then when I put the new build tack down, I hadn't gotten all of the glue off. So now I have bubbles in the build tack. So there's only certain areas on the build plate that I can use.
So when you use the build tack, do you have to adjust the heat from your build plate?
I actually usually turn it down, but a lot of that I think is really dependent on the material on your printer and your printer.
Right.
On mine, it's 260 for PLA, pretty much universal.
For the nozzle?
Yeah. And some of the filaments, like I was printing, you were talking about when my microphone wasn't working, you were talking about glow in the dark.
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
So that prints at 225. So, but as far as the temperatures are to keep the layers sticking together,
right?
So it doesn't cool off immediately. And so I run the temperatures the same as you would with painter's tape or anything else.
Okay.
Yeah, you're talking about the nozzle temperature, not the build plate, though.
260 for the build plate.
Yeah. Yeah, and with the build tack, I was down to 50 on the Malyan, 60 on the Monoprice one, which then blew out on me. And then this thing, the power spec, I have to run that at 80.
What you want to be careful of is when you lower the temperatures like that, what you'll run into is the layers won't stick to each other.
Right.
And you'll get cracks and stuff like that if you do that.
Right. But the problem that I had on the build tack with the Malyan, especially, which that one's the actual build tack, not the similar to build tack stuff, I was getting like a white haze on the bottom. So I found if I turned down the temperature on the build plate, that haze went away, and I actually had an easier time getting it off, and I didn't get as much warping, which is another problem that you can run into. Too much or too little heat, you can get some warping. And you don't want to crank up the nozzle temp too much because you can get some warping. The different materials run at different temperatures too. Why don't we move down to the email from Limax, and that gets us into some of the materials. So he emailed and said he has a question for show 259. As someone who owns birds, well, my wife does, I am very concerned about the fumes that are put off by different products. We have to be hypersensitive so that we don't accidentally kill them. Very, very considerate of you, Limax. Given that, has there been any word on whether 3D printers are bird safe? I don't know if melting the plastic is toxic or not. As a benchmark, I used to solder electronics all the time in the house, and that didn't affect them. Thanks.
There's a reason they were used in mines to determine if the gases were toxic.
Yeah,
right.
That's a good point.
Small amount would
now, Mr. Nelson, you actually had some thoughts on this one.
Well, I guess I don't know his birds, and I did link in the dead parrot sketch from Monty Python. But As far as PLA goes, PLA you probably won't have too much problem with because it's a corn-based material, and so about the most I ever smell from that is maybe just a smell of a little bit burnt popcorn. ABS, though, there have been concerns about printing ABS indoors, basically because it builds up a lot of particulates in the air. I haven't had too much problem with mine, but as far as the ABS prints that I've done, I'm generally not printing that long either. They're, smaller prints usually.
I did a little bit of looking around to see if I could find an answer to this question. There's some people talking about it on Reddit and other forums. Really, if you have a well-ventilated area, you'll probably be okay, but there's no hard evidence either way, for this type of situation. I would say keep it out of the house. Maybe if you have a shed, a garage, something like that, use it in there rather than inside with the birds. Or just really make sure it's very well ventilated, closed off from the rest of the house. That would be my advice, but I would really keep your printer elsewhere.
Well, and the guys from 3D Printing Today really advocate not having a 3D printer in the home. Keep it in your workspace.
Oops.
Because as all of us have them in our offices.
I think part of their concern too comes from fires and stuff like that. I think
right.
They want to keep it out of your house for safety's sake too.
Right. And one of the important things to remember is, yes, this is a piece of machinery. Don't stick your hands in it. It's a moving piece of machinery that moves on its own,
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you're, practicing good safety. But there's a big fire in the UK that's been blamed on 3D printing.
Oh, yeah.
That's not been substantiated. It's just been speculated.
Right.
And really, it's not the 3D printing that was the problem when they get down to it. The genius had put the 3D printer on top of flash paper, on top of the table that they stored their flash paper.
Oh, God.
So if anything sparked, they have all of this flammable stuff right under the 3D printer.
What could possibly go wrong?
And apparently he was doing the hairspray trick in the same room, so.
And it wasn't a ventilated room.
It was,
Wasn't he doing the hairspray and it caught, and he had the hot end heated up at the time that he was doing it?
That's what has been speculated, but it hasn't been substantiated last I heard.
Because that's 400 to 500 degrees.
Celsius. Yeah, you don't. The word was that he had been spraying hairspray directly onto the build plate on the printer. That you don't do that.
No.
I know I shouldn't laugh. This is a series of don't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is just one of those. Do everything like this, and you will burn down your house. So there are some basic safety things that you have to keep in mind that, we can't go through all of them on a show like this, but make sure that you're not running these things with like ABS for hours and enclosed rooms. ABS is worse than just about anything. I think nylon is supposed to be really bad as well. And you can print nylon on some of these printers. You don't use the hairspray indoors. Whitney, I think it was, no, I don't remember. One of the guys from 3D Printing Today was saying he does do the spraying of the build plates. He uses glass build plates, and they just go down to the hardware store and buy a bunch of them. They spray them and then put them in a rack to dry. But he's usually spraying in the bathroom with the fan on.
Right.
And he doesn't do much of it at one time. So it's just like spraying hairspray because, well, it is hairspray. But never spray it in the printer because you'll get it everywhere.
Yeah, don't do that.
Daryl, I'm not saying this is a good idea, but an option. What if you put it on your stove and ran your fan there, the hood vent?
I actually saw someone who put the one of those little mini 3D printers, like it's not the Cube, but one of those other little 3D printers on the kitchen in their apartment because it was the only place that they could run it.
And ventilation.
Yeah. But let's go through the materials. And Chris, do you want to run through the material list for us real quick?
Certainly. We'll start with ABS. Oh, you gave me the tough words.
Yes, I did.
Smart man.
Okay. ABS and PLA and PET-G. Are we done?
No, not quite.
What does ABS stand for, Chris?
Well, it's 3 here, and it's acrylon. Okay, no, acrylonitrile buta.
Nailed it.
It's acrylitrile butyn. Wait, now I can't say.
Now you're speaking German.
Yeah.
Yes.
Butendigen.
But this is the stuff that like Legos are made out of.
Yeah.
So it's really, really durable. It can, as I understand it from people who have done more of the work with it, it does get brittle with the heating and cooling. So if you're in one of those climates like Michigan, where it does get warm in the summers and cold in the winters, it could potentially crack on you. So you don't necessarily want to be using it. But like Chris Nelson was saying earlier, this is the stuff that does behave better in sunlight than the PLA, which is the polylactic acid.
That was the easy one.
Yes.
It's still pretty good.
Actually, the ABS is actually flexible. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here, where these sides will just bend in. You can't do that with PLA.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a more flexible. The layer splits that you're talking about will happen if it doesn't bake the layers together very well, and that'll happen with PLA too, but not generally as bad. This stuff is way more durable, cold, warm, anything, and more water resistant too than PLA is.
Yeah. Well, and PLA is corn based. It is designed to be biodegradable plastic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So PLA is not something that you probably want to use for your caches that are going to be exposed to even much humidity. That said, that's what I've been using for all of my printing because, well, it doesn't stink.
Well, PLA is the easiest of these products to print with.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So there's also the HT PLA from like Protopasta. There's some other ones where you can anneal it and it becomes heat resistant. So I've actually got a dishwasher safe PLA down here that I wanted to try. And it's interesting because most of these, this one's not one of the cool ones, but most of these that I've heard about, this one you just bake it. Some of them.
Like put it in the oven?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them you actually have to take it and dunk it in boiling water.
Huh.
And when you do it, you have to wait for it to turn clear.
Yeah.
And then pull it out. So I wanted just to see that, but I don't remember who it was that actually makes it. I think that's the Protopasta.
Probably.
Protopasta has awesome stuff, including scented PLA, which you don't want to use for a cache.
No.
They have coffee, cinnamon, pine.
That would be fine.
Be perfect.
Yeah, I could actually see using the pine to do a micro container, a little pine tree under the lamp skirt.
Ooh.
That would be adorable.
I like that idea. I like it.
Your Protopasta has cool stuff. Just check them out. They've got cool stuff, period.
But that stuff, I believe the scent is only while it's printing. So it's while it's being heated. Does the scent come out? So when when you're done with the print, it's not going to be. You're not going to smell it underneath the lamppost.
That really stinks.
Yeah.
Darn it.
As I understand it, though, one of the reasons that they did the coffee originally was they're actually using like coffee grounds in the filament to give it a little bit more strength and to give it a different texture too. So it's a matte. It's not the gloss finish that you're used to from most of the filaments. And it is supposed to be a little bit stronger and just feel totally different. It doesn't feel like plastic anymore because of those little bits of material in there. And you can get stuff that suspends wood, sand, and metals in the PLA. And that's one of the other reasons PLA can be cool is they're suspending all these different materials in there. So when you print it, it looks like sandstone or it looks like wood or, and it's very different feel and a different look than what you get out of normal filaments. However, most of this stuff tends to shred your nozzles. So you do have to replace your nozzles much more often.
You can get a wear-resistant nozzle that'll actually take care of that. But the other thing with those types of filaments that you'll run into that's kind of a problem is they are expensive. Like,
yes.
Oh, yeah.
For what you get, if you like the bronze PLA,
oh, that's really
It's like
$130
$130 or something like that.
It's like $3,000 for the same amount of. When we were talking earlier about length of PLA, it's $3,000 for the same amount of length because a kilogram of that weighs so much of the bronze fill weighs so much. You get very little amount of actual film.
And it's more expensive to produce because it's actually metals mixed in. It's a much more complex process to make that filament. It's materials that are much more expensive.
And the other thing I've heard about the filaments, or I've seen about the filaments, is they're very weak because you don't have nearly as much plastic in them. So they're very weak They produce really weak parts. I mean, they look good, but they're not something that you're going to want to use for anything.
Right. Well, and then there's
Not
like
for
the
caching.
carbon. Yeah. There's not for much of anything. Stick it on a shelf. You're not going to use it for something for the most part. But there's ones like the carbon fiber filaments, and those are actually supposed to give it a little bit of extra strength. But again, because it's laying it down in one direction, you don't get the strength that you'd expect out of like a carbon fiber. But it is still supposed to. I don't know that it actually does actually improve it. But that's one of the reasons why Protopasta was supposedly playing with this coffee-based one, because they were looking for that strength, and it did actually give them a little bit more strength without being anywhere near as expensive as carbon.
Well, the thing about it is it has to go through the nozzle. And when you think about that nozzle, it's basically ground up particles that are going to be the only thing that will fit. So even the carbon fiber, it's ground up carbon fiber, so it's not really strengthening anything.
Right.
Well, and if you actually had longer fibers, there's nothing that actually stops the flow aside from you stop feeding it. So if you have these little fibers in there, you're going to get hairs all over the place in your build as it continues to come out of the nozzle after it stops spitting. So yeah, it's probably not worth actually playing with any of those filaments, but they're out there. Don't use them for caching. Definitely don't use them for caching. But yeah, it'd be cool to play with some of them if you had the time and cash to do so.
Protopasta has a composite stainless steel PLA.
What?
Yeah, that's definitely going to be one that you need a better nozzle for.
Yeah.
But kind of wonder how that would hold up out in the elements.
Yeah, that would be interesting. It's still a PLA, so
Yeah,
still have some of those issues. Yeah. Anyway, so let's move on to PET G, which is the polyethylene terephthalate. I probably am screwing that one up too, and I apologize. We will have links to these in the show notes, so go and check them out, and then you can actually see how it's spelled. And the G means though that it's got the glycol added to the PET to give it some extra durability, and this is what the guys over at 3D Printing Today tend to like for making very, very durable prints. It's supposed to have a little bit more flex than the ABS. It is a lot more durable in its temperature range and a little bit easier to work with, as I understand, than ABS is.
I run it the same as I run ABS. Here's an example of a part that I printed in it. And
oh yeah, just like a bottle.
Yeah, and that's actually what kind of what it is. If you think of the when you have like the clear lid on a food container or something like that,
Right.
that's PETG.
Yeah.
It's very strong, and it can be made extremely thin and clear.
Well, and I know one of the big things is the translucent PETGs, so that you can actually. I think they had done the what was it? The Lagunas brewery had done an ad where they were 3D printing a bottle.
Bottle, yeah.
Yeah. So that was one of the guys from 3D Printing Today had actually done the work for that, and they ended up using that. Happy Hodag in the chat room asked to say if it would be possible to build one of these on the show. No. It takes way too long.
To build a printer?
To build a printer or an object?
Well, yeah. Building a printer would take too long, too.
Either way, it would take too long.
These little gift box ones that I've been playing with, the gift box monkey mazes, as I call them, this takes about 8.5, 9 hours to print.
Yeah.
So, no.
That, and we might have some audio issues.
Yeah. They are very loud.
The 3D printer sound.
Yeah, there's plenty of videos on YouTube, I'm sure, of the 3D printing, or just go back and check out my periscopes, because I've had a few times where I set it up and let Periscope play webcam so I don't have to be in the room while it's working. Ed Shaper says we have all night. No, sorry, not going to do it.
Let's all start a print right now.
Oh, hey, I got the advantage because this one does Wi-Fi,
wireless.
so I just go over here and do it.
Well, I just reach right here.
I have the card. I could actually just hit the touch display and do it. Anyway, next one is going to be nylon. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory, but that one does require higher heat and a little bit more practice. There's also TPE, which is thermoplastic elastomer, and TPU, which is thermoplastic polyurethane. And these are flexible filaments.
Mm-hmm.
And they take a little bit more skill. And if you're on one of the rep wraps, you do need a different feeder to actually handle this. And this was part of the problem that I had with trying to print exotic filaments myself is, well, I screwed up my build plate and I couldn't get it to feed right.
Work yourself up to the exotic filaments. Get used to printing first before you move on.
Well, and this is one of the reasons why I want two printers. I want to have one that has the, I can't remember the name of the head now, but there's a special head that you have to use. Well, you don't have to, but there's a special head that's designed specifically for these weird filaments.
Yeah.
And it's about $200 for a single extruder from those guys.
Yeah.
And it's only good for that flexible filament. It doesn't work for PLA, or ABS or PETG. It only works for the flex filament.
Which they claim they do, but there's a lot of reviews saying it doesn't. And then Jeff, you had some protopasta thoughts.
Oh, that was actually just about those scented filaments that we talked about already.
Ah, yes. Well, let's talk about the ones that are best for caches. We've already touched on it, but Chris, you've hidden about 30 of these, I think it was.
32 now.
Oh, okay. So what are your thoughts? You already said that ABS is the one you like for the durability, though.
Yes. I didn't have problems with most of my caches, but the ones that I did have problems with were the moving part ones, like the like the cryptexes that I had done, they would tend to swell a little bit, and once there's any swelling involved, that was my wife. If there's any swelling involved, then you can't rotate the combination on it.
Yeah.
I did this. This fits inside of a 2x2 post, and it's basically just a little like so, but it looks like it belongs in a post. So it works perfect for misdirection. I had a cache actually that the location changed, and I had to find a new way to hide something there because it was our first hide 6 years ago. So that's I brought my caliper, actually went around looking for different places that I could put it and get it to fit.
So yeah, I was a little worried about the flexible stuff and those moving caches like my mazes that might have problems because it's a little too flexible. So that's good to know. And you used ABS and PETG then for the caches?
I haven't used PETG yet because the PETG that I have is clear, and that's not what you want. You want something that is opaque so that they can't see that there's a cache, that it's a cache. The PLA that I had though has been other than the 3 cryptexes, the PLA has been holding up just fine. I haven't had any complaints.
Excellent.
I've had PLA out. I mean, my MakerBot only prints PLA until I mod it. But I've had caches out there for 2 years now, I want to say, that are PLA, and they're all holding up really well. The only one that I've ever had problems with is like the monkey mazes, because you're moving them around, and there's going to be some wear on it. And if you leave that sort of thing exposed to the elements, it is going to become more brittle. And then when you're moving around like that, it's going to damage. I mean, people are tugging and yanking it and everything. So if you do something like that, like yours, if you hide that, I suggest putting it inside of another type of container, maybe an ammo can or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you don't want to leave these prints out in the open. And one of the problems that we've talked about on some of the other shows has been making the container itself watertight. There's really not much you can do aside from like putting the O-rings on to keep them sealed. And with like these monkey puzzles, there's no way that I can figure out how to make an O-ring actually work.
No. Right in the rain paper.
I was gonna say I cheated. I did the right in the rain paper for the 2 that I've actually put out. And Jeff, per your suggestion, I did the Krylon Crystal Clear. Now, the one that I could find locally was CoverMax, which I don't know if that makes a difference.
Does it say that it's a weatherproof sealant?
I think it did.
Yeah, then you should be good. Really, what's going, what you want to protect there are the in between the layers. There's going to be imperfections. So, when each layer is laid, it's not always going to adhere completely. Maybe temperature variance, whatever. Filament is there's a little break in the filament or something, an imperfection rather. So you're trying to seal the layers with the spray, basically, so that the water doesn't seep in through the imperfections in the layers.
And not just any spray paint will work. You've got to get one that will adhere to plastic.
Yeah.
Right. And it has to be the weatherproof and, blah, blah, blah. But you have the advantage of your wife going and painting most of your caches anyway.
Yeah. So most of the time my wife will paint with an acrylic paint, and then I'll use that Krylon Crystal Clear to seal it even more. I actually have one that's in a tree. You have to climb up the tree, and it's the whole, I think I've talked about it before. It's a whole scene where there's a lamppost, there's a car, it's a parking lot and everything. And that poor thing, man, it's taken some beatings from tree branches falling on it. And so over time, you're going to get damaged. It's going to get chipped or something. So you want to go out there and reseal it from time to time.
Well, the biggest thing that people around here seem concerned about with the 3D prints is them walking off.
I still have not had that issue.
I had it happen with a couple of the cryptexes, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
See, and one of the things that's come to mind as a good solution is to actually put the GC number on the cache. Print it on there.
Yeah.
So I keep thinking that that's what I'm going to try when I actually start doing, a few of these in a series or something.
Yeah.
Well, what I foresee for those is actually people not putting them all the way back together.
Yeah, for the monkey puzzles, yeah.
That definitely happens. Yeah, I've had to go out and put mine back together properly from time to time.
Well, the good thing in this area is we have a bunch of monkey puzzles.
Cool.
Not like a huge number, but a good number, and people have been kind of trained. There's an awesome monkey puzzle, total side, which I probably shouldn't do right now, but there's an awesome monkey puzzle not far from me. That's a monkey puzzle in a monkey puzzle in a monkey puzzle in a monkey puzzle in a monkey puzzle. I think it's like 6 or 7 layers deep. It is.
You could totally do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And this is going to be a lot lighter, 3D printed than what they had to do, which is layers of PVC piping.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that they're doing it is a router to etch in the maze, and then they have to take that and glue it into a little bit bigger PVC pipe so that it has that strength. So it gets really heavy really fast.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's well,
besides the right in the rain, sorry, you can always print another container and stick that within that one.
You could.
Yeah.
Just keep printing more containers.
Yeah. Keep on doing it.
Gotta keep going.
Yeah.
You could always put a bison.
Like one of those little dolls from Holland.
Russia.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
What Coaster is saying that the best way to do the monkey puzzles are the trained monkeys.
Oh, I think I know one of those.
Yeah, Chris knows one pretty well, I think.
Oh my. Well, guys, we are close to that hour mark, so let's wrap up this one, and we'll do some more for the patrons that gets a little bit more in depth. But I do think one of the things that I really wanted to get across is this is not something that you're just going to be able to buy a printer, throw it down, and start printing like you do with your inkjet printer. There's a lot more to this. It does take some time to learn to print and to get the feel for it. It's not going to be perfect. And actually, Chris made an excellent point too, which is don't leave your prints unattended, especially when you're first starting out. You want to tell us some of those fears, Mr. Nelson?
Well, I think Sydney had a picture of one where it kind of went sideways. You'll end up with you can easily end up sometimes with a pile of spaghetti.
Yeah.
And the risk is too with some of those, if it gets wrapped around the nozzle, it can actually burn.
Yes, it can start on fire.
Yeah. With that in mind, when you're first getting started, you should probably start with smaller prints. Get that bed leveling down by working on smaller prints, and as you get more comfortable with getting that bed leveled with printing in general, then work your way up to bigger objects.
Well, and one of the things I've found is there's these little 20 millimeter cubes that you can print to get a feel for the filament. And every time I'm putting a new filament in that I haven't used before, I go and I start with printing 1 or 2 of those just to get a feel for that filament. And I'm finding on a lot of these filaments, it takes a little bit of variation, a little bit different flow rate, a little bit different temperature. So, Sydney's holding up one of those cubes right now, and it's a good idea.
Yeah,
to
this
just
one
print
has
those.
a messed up bottom.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah, you've got like everything going on there, from warping and under extruding.
Yeah, that's an old one.
When you're changing from filament to filament, you're using different brands. You want to take a look at what other people have recommended for, your printer, what temperature you want to heat it up to, because each filament's going to be different, and you might, run into some issues of maybe the flow from the printer is too fast because the temperature is too high for that filament. So just do a little bit of research before you put a filament in for the first time. I learned that kind of the hard way with a lot of.
And one of the things that I learned from the Maker Geek filament, don't trust what they tell you from the manufacturer.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. That caused me some problems. But we're going to wrap up the actual episode now. We'll have a bunch of extra links in the show notes so that people can check out some of our favorite tools as well, and some of the tools that we think might look cool, like Octoprint that we were talking about before the show. None of us have tried it, but it looks really cool. So we'll have all that in the show notes, even though we didn't get around to it this time. And patrons will be having an extra audio feed, or an extra audio show that we'll drop in the feed.
Well, Daryl mentioned, unfortunately, we've lost a few patrons over the last couple of months. Hopefully, they're still listening and or watching and enjoying the great free weekly shows that we bring to you. Of course, you don't need to be a patron to support the GeoGearHeads. There are other ways you can support the show that are just as important by sharing the episodes with your friends, fellow geocachers, and, of course, through all the channels of social media. And I know every podcast mentions it, but those review in iTunes really do help raise the visibility of the GeoGearHeads. Thanks to everyone who already left reviews, but it's been a couple of months since we've had a new review posted. Then there's that Patreon program. We're only a few bucks a month. The cost of a latte a week. You can get access to content. Like, isn't that what they say in all the telethons? For the price of a
Yes, but it's not even the price of a latte a month.
No, it's right. Started at half of a drip coffee a month. For just a few bucks each month, you can get access to bonus content like this patron hangout that we're just going to do here in a few minutes. And of course, the ones from several weeks ago and all the way back, plus extra audio podcast feeds and picks from the host. And I've put a couple good ones in just this week. I'm just saying.
Yeah, we got picks going through, I think, February scheduled. So we have weekly picks of some really interesting stuff.
But
and random stuff too, yes. We've got some great shows coming up, including Gary of Geocaching Talk is going to be on next week for a randomized Lee. L-I-I. Yes, I can't talk, so it's a good thing we're wrapping this up. We're going to have Nick from Cachly to talk about the new version of Cachly on the 29th. Then the first show of the next year, episode 262, is going to be live streaming again. We haven't talked about that, believe it since Christmas of last year.
What?
I know. I was looking back. I'm like, we haven't talked about live streaming. So we got the geocaching vlogger and Memphis Mafia to talk with us about that. Then on January 12th, we're going to be talking about cache loads, or is it loads of caches? No, cache loads with Ben of Geocaching Headquarters.
So until then, make sure you check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all of our. We love hearing from you. Leave us feedback by emailing GeoGearHeads@cachemaniacs.com or, as I said earlier, through the many channels that is social media. And your support helps keep the Cachemaniac shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support Cachemaniac shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Wattenberg. This show's copyright 2016 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.
Cash with a Cachemaniac.